Greetings, I am Gresham Zedar, and welcome back to Gresham Reads Monster Blood Tattoo, Book 1, Foundling, by D.M. Cornish. So, in the last video, we joined Rossamünd as he left on his journey to make his way to High Vesting. However, unfortunately, the boy was an absolute fool and neglected to remember the instructions for 5 posts, then board the ship. Unfortunately, the boy only went 4, but he doesn't seem to realize that. But either way, semantics, I suppose, and hindsight and all that, but we will see what happens as he begins his travels with this unusual crew. And we also learned a little bit about how the ships in this universe seem to operate. It appears that it is not an engine used, but some sort of artificially grown muscular structure. Purely organic. And even smaller muscular structures are created in order to ensure that the muscles are properly stretched and primed for their use, which I find fascinating. I've never considered such intriguing, well, I don't know whether to call them devices or what, but it's intriguing nonetheless. Either way, I believe I'm just wasting time. Darkus was kind of holding me up.
Yeah, I said I was sorry. I lost track of time.
Yes, I'm well aware. Anyways, I believe it is time to get started on the next chapter. But first, it is, as per usual, time for the... excuse me. It is time for the next definition. This one is river gates, a noun. Great fortifications built across rivers and broader streams to protect a certain valuable place, or as an outworking of a city's more terrestrial battlements. Certain river duchies and principalities have long used their river gates to control trade, not just in their own domain, but into those domains beyond as well. Makes sense. And also, from what we learned in the last chapter, these gates, such as the Axle, which resides outside of the city where Rossamünd grew, it appears that they are also used to ensure monsters do not sneak in via the river. And from what we saw at the end of the last chapter, so let's say video, I had to physically stop myself. But at the end of the last chapter, we got to see a sneak peek at our first monster. And not just a tattoo of one. But either way, it appears one thing to note I did notice is that the monster honestly did not seem all that interested in Rossamünd. It eyed him for a moment and then just left. It's odd, but whatever. It doesn't matter at the moment, I suppose. Either way, let us continue on with the story, with Chapter 5, and off again. The next day, when Rossamünd mustered the courage to tell Pondinch of the previous night's pale monster, the Rivermaster showed little alarm, or even interest in the sighting. Just one of those things, me boy. and not to trouble yourself over. The Rivermaster stroked his scabrous chin for a moment, pondering. The river's full of strange but harmless surprises. Be taking my word on that one. Old Poundy knows these waters. As the day progressed, they met many vessels going upriver, and were even overtaken by a few faster-moving cromster with a smartly dressed crew. These fine fellows hailed the bargemen of the Hogshead, who only sneered and returned the brisk greeting with sullen looks. A bargeman coiling rope near Rossamünd told him off for waving vigorously as his own reply. "Fancy lad good for nothings," the crewman growled. "Reckons they're better than us." Rossamünd could not help but wish Sebastopol had found him passage aboard the other vessel. In the afternoon, clouds black and blue blew up from the southeast, a hint of the bitter winter to come, making the day dark and the evening even darker. Downriver, a city built on the east bank of the Humor came into view, its many lights already shining in the untimely gloom. Rossamünd consulted the almanac. Proud Sulking, it was called. The major river port of the vast farming region known as the Sulk, and a bitter rival of Boschenberg. It had become rich from the many merchants who wished to avoid the stiff tolls of the axles, and chose instead to pay the lesser port fees that Proud Sulking demanded. There they would unload their cargoes instead and transport them by ox trains along the high roads and through much danger to their customers further upstream. In doing this, Proud Sulking made a jealous and bitter enemy of Boschenberg. Proud Sulking was not nearly as large as Boschenberg, although its bastions and keeps and curtain walls along the riverbank were just as high and threatening. Its many wharves and piers were clogged and bustling with the vigorous activity of rivercraft, their crews and the laborers working ashore. Eager to avoid this foreign enemy city, Rossamünd was afraid that the Hogshead would go about and enter the riverport. Instead, Poundinch steered her as far over to the opposite bank as possible and held his course there, with many a nervous glance over at the forbidding city. Relieved, Rossamünd watched solemnly as the Hogshead passed Proud Sulking by. Also, we have an image of Poundinch. Basically, the page ended whenever I got to Poundinch steered her, and then we have the portrait of Poundinch. And yes, he does look like a gruff fellow. With night closing in, the wind diminished, but the clouds remained. The Hogshead was now many miles south of Proud Sulking, and the land on both sides of the river became boggy and threatening. Holm oak grew in squat, clodded thickets. Bristling swamp oaks and sickly turpentines rose tall and stick-gaunt. This must be a monster-infested place. Here, surely, were the wilds that Franztart and Krampallen had spoke of with such awe and warning. Rossamünd was convinced he could feel boggles and knickers prowling and spying. When the dark finally ruled, the Hogshead's stern and mast lanterns were inexplicably doused so that the cromster moved in pitch black. Even the binnacle lamp that lit the compass by the tiller was hooded to show as little glow as possible. Rossamünd knew that the lights on a vessel should never be put out, on a river or at sea. A ship without its lanterns lit in the night or a deep fog was a danger to all other river-going craft. Why would Poundinch do such a thing? Somehow, Rossamünd knew better than to ask. He certainly would not consult any of the crew. In the blind night, he fought against sleep. Despite his determination, he eventually succumbed and lapsed into a troubled slumber. Sometime later, he was woken by the sound of an anchor dropping. There was some quiet cursing, and Rivermaster Poundish's voice scolded huskily. "Keep her steady, you slop buckets. No noise." The Cromster had halted near the western bank at a place neither remarkable nor distinct from any other part of the river's haunted edge. All hands were pressed to duty as smaller hand lanterns were lit, and the Hoghead's only boat, a large jolly boat normally towed behind, was brought about to the steerward side. The crew were nervous. They lugged up several foul-smelling kegs from below and lowered them by rope into the little craft. Bewildered, Rossamünd listened to the thumps and quiet exclamations. He sat up slowly, hoping to avoid attention, and peered over the edge of the deck. Ponderously laden with barrels, the jolly boat was being rowed slowly to the bank. Poundage was in the bow, holding high a lantern with another fellow, Slow Scab, the Hoghead's own dispenserist. There were 8 crew to row, and 2 sturdy fellows sitting in the boat's stern, holding primed muskets and looking alert. As it moved to shore, the large rowboat became no more than a wan glow of the lantern and a silhouette of the activity within. Soon it disappeared altogether among the hanging branches and crooked buttressed roots that knotted the riverbank. Rossamünd saw, or at least thought he saw, the flicker of another lantern somewhere further in the trees. He could hear still the creaking of oars, and fancied too the echoes of hellos coming back across the water. For a time, everything was still, waiting. Even the frogs. Well, that is a sign right there of danger. Because if wildlife is silent, there is a predator nearby. Or at the very least, something dangerous. There were no lights aboard, and limbers were even stilled. Little could be seen but a faint orange smudge stripped with the indigo shadows of intervening trunks. Rossamünd imagined that he was floating in the midst of nothing, drifting in an empty universe with just his thoughts and his breath. A flicker from the bank interrupted his wandering notions. Then another. A bright flash, half hidden by the black shadows of tree trunks, was closely followed by the muffled but unmistakable popping of musket fire. The crew at once became agitated, even more so when a loud crack snapped and echoed across the water. Quickly, a dim lantern hove into view, indistinctly showing the jolly boat being rowed as rapidly as possible back to the hogshead. There was a fizzing spurt and a brilliant flash, stark against the dark. Another telltale eruption of a musket, fired by one of the sturdy fellows kneeling stiffly in the aft of the jolly boat. Another sturdy fellow was missing. So was Slow Scrub, the dispenserist. Rivermaster Poundage, I don't know why I said Pouncil. Poundage was in the jolly boat's bow, bellowing, "Pull! Pull, you kangaroo pigs!" Behind them, whole trees shuddered and sagged. Cries rang out aboard the hogshead. The stern lantern flared into light, and by its green glow, bargemen hurried and panicked. Rossamünd stood, transfixed by the spectacle. Through parted trunks, something enormous was moving. Rossamünd could barely make out what it was. Long of limb it seemed, yet hunched, pushing at the trees as if it were mere shrubs. It turned its head, and Rossamünd felt it caught a glimpse of tiny, angry eyes. "Pullets and cockerels!" Rossamünd exclaimed in a horrified whisper. There was a loud yell. Simultaneously, one of the Cromster's cannon fired, the smoke of its discharge belching obscuring blackness over the scene. The small thunder reverberated flat and hollow all about the land, and as its fumes cleared, the giant thing was gone. Poundage was now scrambling back aboard his vessel, spluttering foul language, crying for the anchor to be weighed and limbers turned. Poundage said nothing about the affair. No reasons were given for the absence of Sloss Scab or the sturdy musket-wielding chap. No explanation of what the giant on the shore might have been. The contents of the jolly boat, 3 box crates emitting odd, disturbing sounds, were simply hurried into the hold. Odd and disturbing sounds. A trade of some sort, or perhaps animals? Those on watch rapidly got the Cromster moving once more. Those off watch muttered grimly for a time and went to sleep. Rossamünd tried to sleep himself. He tossed for the rest of the night over it, his head full of fear and pondering and repeating images of the Knicker's angry eyes and the startling flash of cannon fire. Rising at the 4th bell of the morning watch, the Foundling determined that all through the next day he would listen, as far as he possibly could, to every word spoken on board the Hogshead. With the rising of the sun and the changing of watch, the crew exchanged meaningful glances with each other. Oi, don't mind carting about bits of bodies in them there barrels of pig's muck, one filthy bargeman offered to another quietly at breakfast. We surely paid notice for doing it. But those things down there now just ain't natural. To this, the second growled wordless agreement, then waggled his finger to ward off evil. Right you are. Ablatum malus ex nobis, he said. Rid evil from among us. Later that day, Rossamünd overheard one of the crewmen who had helped row the party ashore the previous night say to another, "We'd made the trade fine, but that thing must have been watching for a long time, 'cause we heard naught of it till it came out all a-quick with a roar, scatters the coursers with a big sweep of its terrible arms, like this." He swung his own arm wildly, thoughtlessly, letting his voice become louder. And those that hadn't smashed out off into trees, and old Poundy is pushing us back onto the barge while Cloud and Blunton have a crack at it with their firelocks, and poor Slow Scab hurls his potions. You know he's always wanting to give him a good testing. Well, he got his chance, 'cause Gibbon! It was the river master, one eye open as he lounged at the tiller, and this single orb glared horribly at the loquacious crewman. Don't give me a reason to remember your name any further, me darling chiffer-chaffer. At this, Gibbon went pale and lapsed into silence, as did the rest of the crew. One thing that he said kept spinning Rossamünd's head. Scatters the coursers. He had heard of these before. Coursers were folk who robbed graves and stole from tombs to make their living. The dark trades. Blackmarket, I'm assuming? So it seems my hypothesis was correct. Rossamünd is on a very bad ship. Well, I say hypothesis, but I think it was confirmed the moment Rossamünd went 4 instead of 5. What did such wretched people as these have to do with the crew of the Hogshead? Why would Poundage stop in the middle of nowhere in the deep of night just to meet them? Was he part of the dark trades too? After the suspicious doings with Clerk Sergeant Vorwind at the axle, it was becoming discerningly clear that this was most probably the case. And what was that gangling giant he had glimpsed? Rossamünd heard little else that day, but the occasional inaudible griping, and as time went on, his anxieties increased. Surely he had to get off this unhappy vessel. By the middle of the next day, Rossamünd huddled and unmoving at the prow, in an agony of fear, spied the low wall of the spindle as it finally appeared from around a river bend. Not nearly as tall or as grand as the axle, The spindle was a long, low dike of black slate, stretching the river's mile-wide waters. Along its thick middle sections was perforated by 7 great arches. Along its thick middle sections, it was perforated by 7 great arches and several lesser tunnels toward either bank. Each arch and tunnel was blocked by a massive portcullis of blackened iron. Great taffeta flags, one side black, the other glossy white, the colors of the city-state of Brandenbrass, were flown from the 4 central bastions in the middle of the river and flapped wildly in the windy morning. Rossamünd could see many great cannon poking from hatches and strong points along the walls and bastions. The ends of the spindle terminated on either bank in a strong fortress of sharply sloping walls, high, steep roofs, and tall chimneys, and were protected by stout curtain walls of the same black slate as the gate itself. Rossamünd could even see that the ground at the foot of the curtain walls was densely prickled with a vicious-looking thicket of thorny stakes. About the eastern fortress, a small wood of swamp oak and olive grew, while along both banks leafless willows wept into the black run of the humor. The spindle instead was squat, imposing, and daunting. To Rossamünd, however, it was also the chance to escape. Hope fluttered within his rib cage, and he stared at it longingly. When Poundinch sighted the river gate, he became agitated and positively alive. He leapt to his feet and paced his station as he had done at gunnery practice, muttering and gesticulating vaguely. "Stay easy, lads. They haven't caught old Poundy yet," he said over and over. He called down the speaking tube to the gastroneer as softly as he could, for sound travels too well over water. "Ease her down, Mr. Shunt. And when she's at the gates, keep the limbers limber, you hear? You may need to make it away right quick." Then he growled low to the boatswain, always on hand. "Secure below. No glimpses, no clues. Just barrels of fat. Same old rigmarole. And make sure the newest acquisitions keep quiet, too." The archway they were to enter was low, forcing the crew of the hogshead to lower the mast so that it lay flat on the deck. As this was done, the boatswain reappeared from below. The rivermaster ordered him to pipe all hands on deck. Responding to such a call was instinct to Rossamünd, and he joined the end of the ragged line of crew, standing straight and as smartly as he could. Poundinch stalked in front of them all and muttered just loud enough to be heard. "I want us to be like we was an happy old crew. No secrets, no gripes. Just on an happy jaunt down the old humor. You gets me?" "Aye, Poundinch," was the common assent. The rivermaster waggled his conspiratorial eyebrows. "No grumbling," he glared at Gibbon. "No snarling." He squinted at some other bargeman Rossamünd could not see. "Now back to it!" he barked, raising his arms. As everyone returned to his labors, so Rossamünd returned to the bow. A neat, trim cromster trod proudly into the tunnel before them, its crew standing smartly in the ranks on deck. It was the same vessel that had passed the hogshead 2 days before. Once again, Rossamünd wished he was aboard her instead. As it moved away, he looked longingly at the shiny nameplate on the stern. His heart froze. The plate read, Rapunzel. "Rosie, me lad, over here," Poundinch called. The Foundling stepped over cautiously, head low, eyes wide. He could see the rivermaster staring at the other cromster's stern. "Worked it out at last, have ye?" Poundinch sneered. Rossamünd went pale. "Took ye a bit, didn't it?" Faster than Rossamünd could react, the rivermaster's hand shot out and grabbed him in a painful pinch by the back of the neck. You stay right by me, lad. Poundage bent and leered into Rosamund's face. Just remember, you're me cabin boy, got it? No, sir. I mean, aye, sir, was all that would come out of the Foundling's mouth. He could only stand there while Poundage's fingers pressed painfully on the tendons of his neck, and marvel at the Reverend Master's sudden cruelty. Poundage glared up at the spindle. Made by a fierce, diligent folk, this, he said in a conversational tone, at odds with the grip he had on the boy's scarf. A cause of much consternation to the lords of your city when it were built. He turned his glare to the boy. Whatever happens from here on, you're gonna stay right here by the thriller, and old Uncle Poundy's side. Got me? The hogshead was passing slowly under the high, broad tunnel of a boarding pier upon which stood several stern-looking officials, each uniformed crown to boot toe in black proofing. Bargemen at the forecastle and poop fended the hogshead away from the slimy walls of the arch with long, strong poles. Ah, ahoy, Kirklings! Poundage called in a simulation of generous affability. Ready to pay me taxes, same as always. Where's all excise master Dogwater? Not once during this cheerful display did the river master let up on his wicked grip on Rosamund's scruff. A serious-looking fellow, Rosamund thought, even more serious than the officials serving the axle back in Boschenberg, gave the rivermaster a long, odd look. Excise Sergeant Dogwater had been reposted to tasks more suitable, he stated flatly. Poundage seemed momentarily put out by this revelation, and he released his grip on Rosamund. His face contorted frighteningly, but reverted marvelously to the previous false grin. He kept his hand upon the Foundling's shoulders. It must have looked friendly enough on the pier, but the rivermaster's fingers were like cunning hidden claws. Very good, very good. Pass all me well wishes. It was as fine an excise man as that ever served on this river. Poundage rocked on his heels, and after a pause in which Rosamund swore he could see the rivermaster's thoughts turn like winch gears, added, Present company accepted, of course. Of course. Unimpressed, the excise clerk held out an expectant hand. Now, present your documents and your tallies, and scrutineers will be aboard presently. Poundage did as he bid. The papers were taken through an iron door in the arch's hefty footing. Poundage perspired, continually pursing his lips and flexing his free hand behind his back. Under the axle, the hogshead master had been as cool as the cold side of a pillow. Here, however, with no secretive conversations or cynical winkings with one of the clerks, he was visibly agitated. If I could English properly, that would be lovely. The original excise clerk reappeared, and as expressionless as before, followed by three gentlemen heftier of build and bearing heavy, long-handled cudgels, the scrutineers. With them came a quarter of musketeers, all uniformed in black, with trimmings of white. In two ranks they lined up, 5 at the front, 5 at the back, on the stone pier. The excise clerk held up his right hand and took a breath. By the declaration of his grace, the Archduke and Regent of Brandenbrass, and through the ratifications and execution thereby of his cabinet of the charters set upon the sanctity of our borders, and its ordinances concerning the same, you are presently ordered to allow to board, and to be boarded by and searched by officers of the sovereign state of Brandenbrass, and to declare upon a solemn eye that you bear no contraband or other illicit articles upon or within this vessel, whether by hold or other conveyance, and that you regard inviolate the law in assertions of the state of Brandenbrass and that state's authority. How say you? Rossamünd had no idea what had just been said, although it sounded extremely important and gravely impressive. Essentially, Rossamünd, what he was doing was declaring that they'd allow themselves to be boarded, or they will be forcefully boarded, and that they declare that they are holding no contraband. It seemed that Rivermaster Poundinch was not understood either. Had not understood either. His squint grew more furrowed. Aye. If it's coming aboard you wants, then he bowed low with a glance to his boatswain. By all means. The scrutineers and the excise clerk stepped across from the pier and tapped about the upper deck for a good long while. Poundinch hovered nearby, answering the curt quizzing of the clerk with affected politeness. Rossamünd stayed by the tiller as instructed, hard knotting and unknotting alarmingly. It was a gloomy afternoon, made gloomier under the shadow of this arch. Eventually, the search moved to the hatch. What a horrendous stench coming from below, sir," called the clerk. "Why, aye, sir." Poundinch made to look chastened. "I intended to have her in ordinary this winter, to give her a thorough swilling in and out. 'Tis the pig fat, you see. Good for the purse, but hard on the nose." The clerk put a foot on the top step, and the scrutineers moved to follow. He paused and half-turned. "Are your limbers still turning, sir?" "Well, pray still them at once. You are committing a grave breach, sir." The clerk made to mark an entry in a large ledger. Just for a moment, Poundinch looked like a cornered cat. Then, with a "we'll not be having that," he shoved the excise clerk down the ladder and struck the nearest scrutineer right in the jaw with one of the thick wooden pins that were used to hold the mast. "Let fly, Mr. Shunt," he bawled. "Let fly!" With this, the chaos began. Everyone but Shunt hesitated. The hogshead lurched forward, and people sprawled, Rossamünd with them. Poundinch leapt into the hold. Two scrutineers pounced after him over their fallen comrade. Hiss, crack. The boatswain felled with one pistol shot to the neck as the other disappeared below. On the pier, musketeers presented their firelocks, their officer crying over the din, "Hold fast, or be slaughtered where you stand!" The crew of the hogshead just jeered as their vessel sheered away. "Do your worst, you prattling hack-million!" "Hold yourself, chiff-chaffing lobcock!" "Go lay on a muck-hill, Mary!" And many other worse things other bargemen returned. A quarto of musketeers fired a rattling volley that brought shrapnel to their end, while someone aboard shouted, "Grapnels! Grapnels!" The crew returned fire with pistol and blunderbuss, their shots having little effect as the musketeers' proofing proved its quality. Only one of the soldiers fell, simply sagging where he knelt, shot through the head. Amazed at how suddenly and matter-of-factly the violence had begun, Rossamünd froze first with disbelief, which quickly dissolved into utter terror. Cold nausea gripped his guts, setting his fingers tingling. The steerboard bow struck the farther wall of the arch as the boatswain was surprised by the heavy lurch and failed briefly to keep the vessel under control. The ironclad hull ground with loud metallic groans along the stone, and the hogshead lost speed. The boatswain struggled for a moment, then reasserted his will on the vessel. Under his now sure hand, the hogshead went out the other side of the arch. Grapnel hooks were thrown to ensnare the cromster, but none held. The hogshead was clear. "All limbs to the screw, shunt!" the boatswain cried into a speaking tube to the organ deck. "Get us out of here!" Below, a great contest thumped and bellowed. Poundage and whatever crew had descended to aid him tackled the excise clerk and the doughty scrutineer. The sounds they all made gave no indication of who was winning, but as the Cromster gained speed, it was obvious that Shunt was not involved. Rossamünd was shot in self-preserving action as a musket fired once more and the balls panged about them. One sent some poor chap toppling into the humor. Another struck the balustrade near Rossamünd's head, scaring him mightily. And as he struggled to find a refuge, a musket shot clouded him upon his chest. It hit harder than the hardest thump in Harundo, and sat him down with a tiny audible huff. For a flash, his whole existence was intense agony right next to his heart. His eyes bulged, tears streaming. It hurt too much to breathe. He shook with terror as he thought he had gasped his last. How could they shoot us at a small lad like him? What had he done that they should hate him so? Then breath returned. He was winded and certainly bruised, but he was not badly harmed. The proofing Franzitard had provided had done its admirable work. Wiping away the tears and mucus, Rossamünd marveled. He had been musket shot and had survived. Yes. Contrary to popular belief, bulletproofing does not mean you are unharmed. That only works if whatever is protecting you is able to absorb the impact and disperse it properly. But if you get shot while wearing bulletproof vest, even if the bullet does not go through, it will still hurt. Still, either way, semantics, let's move on. The Cromster gathered more speed and made for the middle of the river, putting 100 yards between her and the spindle. The vessel shuddered mightily as the gastrenes were strained. The crew would do all they could to make their escape. Only a gallows or worse awaited otherwise. It was then that the great guns started. Boom was the first and only warning. No range-finding splash, no whistle of a shot just missing overhead. The cannon of the spindle were too well sighted, and the gunners too well practiced. The very first shot hit the stern plate, which, being the only unclad part of the hull, was one of the weakest parts of the vessel. It was a fine hit that sent wood splintering and water spraying, and shook the Cromster to its ribs. The next two shots struck ironclad plates along the hull, each with a dull stentorian ring. Return fire was offered by the gunners of Hogshead, but what good are 12-pounders against the spindle's thick walls of slate and close-packed earth? The balls just bounced on the fortifications and plopped uselessly into the river. Whether it was the fourth, fifth, or sixth shot of the great guns, none could tell, but one of them removed the boatswain without a trace, and left the tiller as nothing more than a shattered, unusable stump. The hogshead veered crazily. A certainty took hold of Rossamünd. The time to depart had come. He was on the wrong vessel with the wrong rivermaster, and probably headed for a cruel and horrible end. Equally worse, now those in the spindle were counting him as one of the dastardly crew. He had seen hangings on Unhallow's night. He knew how criminals met their end. His chance to flee was here. Gathering up his valise, his satchel, and his hat, Rossamünd flung himself from the gory deck and into the inky chill of the mighty humor. Well, that certainly took quite a intense turn. Still, I do hope you enjoyed this video, this chapter. I'm certainly finding this quite intriguing. we got our first sneak peek at a potential nicker, one of the larger monsters, as well as confirmation that even in such a society, the black market thrives, even if under a different name. The dark trades, coursers. It's interesting. Still, either way, feel free to leave a like and a comment down below your opinions on this. And also make sure to share the video around. This is an interesting book. A bit of a slow start, but it's quite intriguing nonetheless. So, perhaps you might know someone who would enjoy this. I know for a fact I'm looking forward to reading more. But in the meantime, that is going to call it for me. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell to be alerted whenever a new video is uploaded or Darkest goes live. One thing to note as well. Is that Darkest will be streaming both here and on... I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the site, but the purple site, as he likes to refer to it as here on YouTube. He will be streaming there on Saturdays and on Mondays, so feel free to catch him and interact with him there. And he'll stream here on Thursdays and Fridays, so feel free to tune in to those streams if you wish to interact with Darkest directly. And also, Darkest does have commissions available if anyone is intrigued and wishes to have a personalized message or lines read by either one of the voices or perhaps a requested voice. Either way, I will see you all in the next chapter. And I am Gresham's it all, and I do hope you have a pleasant day.